Hey, how's it going again, everybody? Welcome to Carpo's Corner. This is where I like to come and make a video and bullshit about random things that I find interesting. So, today, I'm going to talk about a few important books. Now, this of course is going to be very subjective. I've had several people ask me about what books I like in the past. I'm like, is it really relevant? I mean, there's so many different books. For some people, it's the Bible and that's it. For other people, it's all technical jargon. Some people like fiction, some people like nonfiction. And who's to say what's the best? I mean, I don't know. Is it more... I could easily sit and say that, nonfiction is superior because you're learning things. But if a person lives their life in fantasy land and they enjoy themselves, who's to say they're on the wrong path? But I'm not going to get into the details on that one. I just got done making this this tincture over here, and I'm really stoked. I took like 100 and I think it was 112 grams, about a quarter pound of some Harlequin Tsunami bud that I'd had around for a year or so, and I ended up, I did I used vegetable glycerin as the base for the tincture. And there are a couple ways to do it. You can actually put it in the jars with the cannabis and let it sit on a windowsill or, out of direct light, but rotate it regularly until it's, well absorbed. Or you can just use a crock pot method, which I did. And this is a pure CBD oil. And I'm just mentioning this off the cusp because it's something I'm not including in my book list of important books is science books, or books that will help you make things that will that will assist you. I mean, if the shit ever hits the fan, people are going to want to know how to build and create and do things. You may see an organic chemistry book on the shelf right now and it looks like nothing, and then down the road everything goes to shit and all of a sudden you can't find specific books anymore. I mean, I'll just leave it at this. The ability to go online and find any book you want on any subject is something we take way for granted. I mean, you can go on the internet and you figure you can find anything you want. But tomorrow, if the internet's gone, so is all the shit that you can find on there. And half of the stuff that you find is bunk anyway and doesn't have to be backed up. I gotta say, the one thing about books is that, while they're definitely not 100% factual, and, some of them are, at least they contain references, and generally a person won't spend the time and effort to publish a book unless they've done a little bit of research. It's just a lot easier to write a blog online and pretend you know everything. So, I guess I'm not going to go in any particular order, but these all have their own specific... And this is... I'm not going to by any means say this is the most important 7 books. Not even at all. What I'm saying is, I went to my shelf, and I looked through all my books before I came out here, and I said, if I were to pick 7 books that would help a person understand... and I try to go on I'm an American citizen, because that's what I know. That's where I live. That would help them understand how our nation got to where it is, how the people got to where we are. The first one I grabbed, which inspired me, was this one. This is The Creature from Jekyll Island. This was a second look at the Federal Reserve by G. Edward Griffin. And it's no small potatoes. It's a heavy book. I'll just read the little clip on the back. Where does money come from? Where does it go? Who makes it? The money magician's secrets are unveiled. Here's a close look at their mirrors and smoke machines, the pulleys, cogs, and wheels that create the grand illusion called money. A boring subject? Just wait. You'll be hooked in 5 minutes. Reads like a detective story, which it really is. But it's all true. This book is about the most blatant scam of history. It's all here. The cause of wars, boom-bust cycles, inflation, depression, prosperity. Your worldview will definitely change. Putting it quite simply, this may be the most important book on world affairs you will ever read. And so far, of all the different books I've read about the world, when it comes down to finance, this actually has been. It's fantastic. Look, I mean, I should probably go back. It's been several years since I read it. I was really into this kind of stuff a while back. But understanding finances, understanding how the Federal Reserve works, and how, what money really is a hugely crucial thing in today's world, to understand who we are and what's really valuable, because that's given me, an understanding of what fiat money is and the gold standard. So I'll move on to my second book. Now I actually grabbed two separate ones. This is a completely opposite end of the spectrum. But this is the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Mythology. It's a pretty thick book too. But it's mostly pictures, symbols, ideas, all through history, every culture and religion and where they came from. To understand people on that level and how we created these systems of belief and what inspired them and how we've dealt with them. These are fantastic books. However, if I had to choose, I would say Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, just this simple little book, and he's written several. The idea of mythology getting us to where we are, that covers it a lot better, whereas the other book would just be general mythology. See, none of these books are specific this book, especially not the mythology books. Any of them are great. The Creature from Jekyll Island, that's a specific book, but there are several books about the economy. So, on to number 3. I was going to do this one last, but it's on the top. So, Enduring Issues in Philosophy by Gerald W. Eichhofer. Now, I don't know. I'm sure there are better books on this subject. I mean, this is the one I have. But it's about 375 pages. Just as an example for some of the chapters, what it does is it takes it and proposes an old philosophical dilemma that we've had, as far as we know, back through history, and tried to explain from both sides how people feel about it. So, for example, chapter 1 is what can we know? Chapter 2 is what is ultimately real. And there I'll break down into these subchapters. And it'll make a statement like, ideas are ultimately real. And then it will put the pros and the cons for that. All knowledge is gained through the senses. Scientific method gives us knowledge. Things like that. And then chapter 3 is, does God exist? And then the first one would say, God must exist because the world exists. God necessarily exists. Or 3, evil proves that God cannot be all good. All these different ideas. They're the big issues that come up when we're having discussions. Hugely important issues. And this is for Christians, for atheists, for everybody. Because if you're an atheist and you cast out all beliefs and you don't even want to learn about them, I really don't believe that a person should consider themselves, be a proud atheist. There's one thing to not believe in any God or anything beyond yourself. There's another thing to actually actively pursue that role and to say, I'm an atheist, and to be proud to say so, as if you can prove God is not real. These are the issues that are covered in this. Atheism can be a defense, or it can be, a matter of fact type way of thinking. But what we have to realize is it's much more complicated. The questions are a lot deeper. If you don't understand and haven't researched religions, then it's really hard to understand whether or not you believe them or not. Because if you're only getting your view from a few Christians, it's like getting your whole view of politics from watching people speak in political campaigns, or understanding all Muslims through a few terrorist attacks. And we as a nation, we're not that shallow, are we? I won't even go there. Fifth book. Fifth and sixth book. They're both by the same author. The first one is called Guns, Germs, and Steel. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard of that one. It's by Jared Diamond. The Fates of Human Societies. They made a documentary on this. So if you're not the type that likes to read, all you have to do is just rent, buy, whatever, the documentary. And it's based on the book. But it's a pretty thick book. It's 475 pages. So it's not fully covered in detail, I don't think. But it's been a while since I read this too. It's probably another time again to read it. It was a bestseller. Guns, Germs, and Steel pertains to the three of the main components in the world that helped us to get where we are. Oil is obviously one of those, but what they meant was those who had the proper weapons, guns, could win the wars. Those who had germs, the germs part of it, which is like bringing smallpox over from Europe, or sometimes when a foreign invader would come in, say to South America, 2 2/3, 3/4 of the people would die from the diseases they brought, not from the actual soldiers fighting. So it would just be like they'd go into wipe out an entire population without even trying. The first biological warfare, unintended originally, but later intended, as the smallpox blankets show. Which the smallpox blankets were given to the Native Americans, in case you don't know that. Most people, I think, know that by now, but they wanted to infect people in order to clear the land quicker. And which leads me to what happens after a society builds themselves up on guns, germs, and steel. The steel part is pretty obvious, building structures, infrastructure. Collapse by Jerry Diamond. I wouldn't say that it's a very... it's not a negative book. It doesn't say, this is what's wrong with the world, and this is when our country's going to die. It says it's actually collapse, how societies choose to fail or succeed. And this came after Guns, Germs, and Steel. But it talks about how, pretty self-explanatory, how ancient cultures up till now have collapsed, how empires have collapsed. The Ottoman empires and, the Turks and all these different people in history who have risen to power and lost their power or been drowned out by other powers, and how they lost their power. But more than that, how bigger countries like Rome failed. So, got a problem. Hold on. Family drama. One of the kids stole the other kid's seat. So, this will bring me to my last book, which is, I guess I should finish talking about collapse. How the Roman Empire fell, and how several cultures and empires have fallen due to circumstances that could have been prevented had leaders not been so, let's just say, ignorant and selfish and foolish. And as a society grows, we elect dumber leaders, because the leaders themselves aren't necessarily the movers and shakers of the society. And we get into an age of decadence where people are consuming more than they need. And we are in this age of decadence right now, the age of excess. And after this comes a collapse. And it's pretty much going to be imminent. I mean, we as a society can't continue along this whole path the way we've been going, until now. You just cannot consume as much as we consume and build a society as fast as we're building it, and populate as fast as we're populating, without circumstances prevailing that will cause a downfall in the long run. However, we've never been even nearly as populated as we are now. I mean, I believe our population has doubled in the last 50 years. I mean, humans been here, building societies for tens of thousands of years, and we have doubled our population just in the last century. That is absolutely nuts. It's way, overlooked, I think, that just how important that really is, because if we continue to go along the same path, in the end, we'll be doomed. The last book, which I wasn't even sure if I was really going to pick this one. The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This isn't really relevant to any factual information throughout the world. Well, depending on, I would say it's very factual as far as what you're trying to take away from it. This 650-page book covers everything. I flipped to the chemical marriage. It's kind of a takeoff of some of those ancient mythologies and how they pertain to the mystery schools. And I guess this would maybe only be that's so funny, the mystery schools. And there's right then I flipped past a page that said the ancient mysteries. It's the name of the chapter. But there's people out there who know this book well, and others who have never heard of it, and there are people who just despise it. People who despise Manly Hall, that think he's a Satanist. I've heard everything about him. He was a very peaceful, quiet, collected man with a very good head on his shoulders. He knew how to speak very coherently for long periods of time without faltering. And everything he said was just, he was just an encyclopedia of not just ancient mysteries, rituals, or occult knowledge, but what it means to be a human. See, I wasn't as interested in the tables of Isis in Egypt and the meaning of the Egyptian pharaohs and behind all the symbols and everything. That's great. That's all great information. I wanted information that would benefit me in my life. And it was Manly Hall that taught me that the most important thing is to be cool, calm, and collected, and humble, and relaxed, and to respect each person around you, to respect all the other humans, to respect all cultures, and to really understand people instead of being judgmental and closed-minded. But, I guess I could go on about Mr. Hall. He was a fantastic human being, I think. And the reason why he's so despised by some is because the Christians don't like him, because he wasn't a Christian. He was more into the knowledge in general was his, belief. And he did have some interesting occult beliefs towards the end. He did believe in reincarnation, which Christians don't, which is why I've heard a lot of Christians say they don't like him. But also, they claimed that he was satanic or whatnot because he talked about some of the symbology he did. But mostly because he was a Freemason. He was an honorary 33rd degree Freemason. And, a lot of people with that type of knowledge are. It wasn't his pride and joy, he didn't obsess about it. It was, he was into his work. And I think he wrote this book in like the 30s, or 1940s or something. It's an old book. So that's it. Those are the books I got. This is a long video already, so I better get going. I did have one last one off to the side that I wasn't going to include in it because it's relative to a specific mindset. But I just saw it at the last minute and grabbed it. I haven't even finished it yet. It's not this specific book that I'm really referring to. This is Taoism. Taoism is well known as kind of an Eastern practice. It's Taoism, Zen, and Buddhism. They're all very similar in the fact that they all accept. They're very accepting and tolerant of other religions. They're not systems that are set in stone where they say this is how you have to be. The Tao means the way. It's not a religion, but it's a way of living. And it's through observation, of thousands of years of human life to say how did we get to where we are and what really moves people instead of, how can we force ourselves or convince others of our opinions. But Taoism is, it's kind of in its own league. It's just a very interesting look if you've never looked into it. But, Chinese mysticism, I guess. But none of it makes a complete picture. We need a Western look at all these ancient ideas. Even Manly Hall, he's got his dry points in there where, he thinks rock music is going to cause the problems in the youth, that kind of, the old man attitude. And I can scoff at that and just take in the stuff that, But then as I go on, I start to see the things that my parents, they were told about how, bad television is corrupting the youth. And I grew up listening to heavy metal and rap songs that cussed all the time. And I'd read the articles in Circus Magazine or, which was I don't know if they still have it or not. It was like the rock and roll magazine. Before the internet, we had to have magazines, and we'd get them every month. And Metal Edge, and I think was one. And they'd always have these articles about the PMCC, what was it, the parental thing, where they wanted to basically, they put the parental advisory started back then, explicit lyrics. And it went on like all our favorite albums. They had to, edit the tape covers and things like that, and we'd get upset because, like, that ain't right, they're getting in our face. And now as an adult, as a grown man, I look back and I kind of, I understand it, I understand how the older generation can look at what's going on and think, that's horrible, it's going to corrupt the youth. Because for weaker-minded people, it does corrupt them. It can corrupt them. You know, if kids grow up today and they're seeing pop stars who only care about brand name shit, and they're shallow, and they're all about looks, they're going to think that's what's important. And the fact that people are growing up feeling like they have, you know, they have a very low self-esteem about themselves, even when they're beautiful people, inside and out, because they're told that they have to fit a certain mold and a quota. So how that's relevant to me is that those are the crucial aspects of our society. We're growing up feeling bad about ourselves because we don't understand the world and what it really means to be alive. We can go delve head on into a religion, and in the end we'll end up having to defend ourselves, or it might not suit us. Or we can dive into a complete rejection of the whole system, religion, everything, and then we'll find ourselves lonely and saying, you know, if you're not playing, if you're not in the game, you can't complain about the game, I guess. You know, it's very complex. We've set ourselves on a very, I'm not going to say a dismal path as humans, but it's not our fault. Okay, that's what I'm saying. When I step back, I can't say this enough times, you know, step back and picture everyone around you. You know, like this is the old kind of uniforms attitude where we're all the same. You know, with masks and uniforms, we're all the same. It allows a group to work and operate under one umbrella, one, you know, group. And you see this in private schools and whatnot. It's so nobody has to stand out. It's not so you can't be an individual as much as it is so other people don't fit. So everyone fits and goes along with the same program, which is what we're told is bad about the society we live in. We said we followed the program. Since we were young, we followed the program. The TV programs, they call them programs. Just think about that for a minute. But after a while, you can reject that too and say, I can still utilize these things in society without being marketed to. I'm one of those people you can't market to. You know, you can send me a million advertisements and try to get me to buy anything, but it just doesn't work. I know that because of the things that I end up buying, or not buying rather. When I do buy something, it's used or something that I've never seen an ad for, or try to support a local business if I am buying something, but that's hard because it's complicated out there. So anyhow, those are a few books I think might that piqued my interest, and a few subjects, I should say, not the specific books, although Jared Diamond's are very specific, as well as Manly Hall. And I gotta say that Creature from Jekyll Island book, yeah, it may be boring. They say it reads like a detective novel, but it's about money. And unless you're interested in economics, which I wasn't when I read it, but I forced myself to do it because I wanted to be armed with the proper information. And since then, it's even become more complex. But understanding world affairs and where the money really is tells us where we can put our energy and who we should be upset with, if anyone. Or if we just let things go, or if we can make a difference, or whose door should we be knocking on, you know? So, yeah. Talk to y'all later. Hope y'all are doing fantastic on this